Welcome to Cherry Beckert's Professional Services Series, the podcast for leaders across professional services navigating growth, complexity, and change. In this series, we unpack the ideas, insights, and decisions shaping firms today so you can better serve clients, strengthen your business, and stay ahead in a competitive market. Thank you for joining. Welcome to the Professional Services Podcast Series. I'm Kristin Bettorf, Professional Services Leader, and today we're diving into the Modern CFO, the evolving role of the CFO. Joining me today is Scott Duda, the Professional Services Partner, and Alex Wiley, a Director in our CFO Advisory Services practice. Together today, we will explore how the CFO role is shifting from reporting to more of a strategic leadership, what's driving finance modernization, and where professional services firms should focus to create a real impact. So with that today, I'm going to start by asking a question to our guests. Why is finance modernization such a priority right now?
And Kristin, I'll pick up and start there. And that's actually, I think there are a couple factors that are driving that, but I think there's one overarching factor that's impacting a lot of this, and I think that's AI. AI is due to the rapid technology advancement of AI, a lot of our CFOs are now finding it easier to, or at least more accessible to modernize. And so with a couple of the underlying factors we're seeing, the CFOs are now being pulled into strategy more than ever. CFOs are no longer just the stewards of financial reporting, they're also the influential decision makers. A couple other factors we think about that also drives external pressures, such as regulations. Those same AI advancement enablers that we talked about earlier also will drive new regulations around processes. Competition. Everybody's trying to improve their margins. Every competitor is trying to make the most out of bottom line. And so we're seeing competition really driving the need for finance modernization. And then lastly, but not least, economic uncertainty. The more uncertainty there is, the more we want to become lean and get more ROI out of our processes. The other thing I would say here that really is driving for finance modernization is really the challenges we're still seeing that our finance teams are having. We still see a lot of finance teams spending too much time on manual processes instead of insight generation. One of the things we like to say in CFO Advisory is finance isn't just closing the books anymore. It's expected to help drive the business.
With that, how do you think the role of the CFO and the finance function has changed?
Good question. And we'll first start with finance. Finance is no longer just reporting. Finance is forecasting. Finance is influencing decisions. Because again, these new enablers we have with our systems, these connectors, is allowing more visibility and access into data rather than making a reactive decision. Finance now has the ability to have real-time data in front of them to influence decisions. And then from a CFO perspective, CFOs are now required to guide growth decisions. Not only am I the steward of the finance and the reporting, I'm responsible in the CFO seat guiding the growth decisions with this data that I have. A CFO is supporting digital transformation. A CFO is no longer just in the CFO office. The CFO office includes digital tech stack. And then again, the CFO is owning its own data and technology strategies. We say finance is now a cross-functional leader, not just a back office function anymore.
So I'm curious, Alex, what makes professional services different than other industries?
Good question there, Kristin. And the economic model is fundamentally different for most professional service firms. Revenue is driven by people and billable hours. There is no product. We're not selling anything. We're not making widgets. It's people. It's billable hours. The biggest cost on most professional service firms' P&L is labor. Again, people drive revenue. Labor is the largest cost on most balance sheets. And the one key here I would say here is a small change in utilization has a significant impact on your bottom line.
The other thing, Kristin, the professional services industry, we're not making widgets. We don't have inventory. We're not necessarily marketing a product. And so clients are buying expertise, judgment, and relationships. A lot of the people that are running these businesses in CPA firms, law firms, engineering firms, they grew up in the business. And so they're engineers, they're attorneys, they're CPAs. And they haven't necessarily thought about running a business before. And so it's a much different skill set, and they're thinking about challenges that they've never thought about before as they were growing up in the business.
And that's a good point there, Scott. And what are the implications to that to the finance team? If I'm the finance team, we need to focus on staffing. Do I have the right people, the right skill set? Because again, within professional service, people are the driver of revenue. Do I have the right pricing model? Is the price structure fitting my fit my cost structure? And then more importantly, realization. Am I realizing enough on my margins? It's not just financial reporting anymore when we think about it. In professional service, operational decisions are financial decisions, I would say.
Sure. If modernization is a priority, what are we seeing that is holding firms back and moving forward?
That's a good question. I think in our experience, from what we're seeing, there are three main barriers, and some of these barriers are actually flashing red flags for why we see clients that need modernization. Data and system complexity. So, we did a CFO survey, and 48% of our CFOs cite integration issues as a top problem. And that number jumps up to 72% when you just focus on professional service CFOs. But the key there is a lot of our clients have multiple systems, and they have no single source of truth, but they don't know which system is a single source of truth. And so we find a lot of the redundancies in systems and ERP, but we find a lot of our clients, CFOs, are afraid to modernize because they're afraid if they pull the wrong system or redundant system out, that single source of truth is no longer there, and it collapses down on the completeness and accuracy of the data being used. Another kind of barrier that we found is talent gap. If you think about it, 58% of say lack of expertise slows progress. Most organizations, again, you have your CFO, who is the influencer decision maker now. You have your controller, who is running the accounting department. You have your senior accountants, and they're doing the transactional level accounting. These guys are not change agents. They're not change managers and process change. And so most organizations lack that expertise in-house. And even if you have the capacity from a resource perspective in-house, most resources lack both the technical and analytical capabilities to actually go into it and do a modernization. And the last one I would say, which again is a flashing red flag for a client that needs a finance modernization, is process inefficiencies. If you have a lot of manual workflows, slow billing, fragmented reporting, how this is a barrier because you spend a lot of your time, a lot of your resources are spent around doing these manual workflows, slow billing. You don't have time to really think about it and get yourself out of the weeds on how can I improve my processes. I will say investment doesn't match ambition. And what we mean by that is we have a lot of CFOs who want to do it, but many firms underinvest in the modernization process.
Yeah, Alex, it's not that firms don't want to do this. It's not that they don't want to modernize. It's they don't know where to start. They're drowning in recruiting challenges, in retention challenges. There's a ton of consolidation, especially in the engineering and CPA space right now. And so you're dealing with all of those things. And when you think about it, it's almost, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so they're focused on putting out the biggest fire that they see in front of them at that point. But also this, is the foundation for everything else that you're doing. And so, I've got plenty of clients. I could give lots of examples where it's hurting them on recruiting if they're not modernizing. It's hurting them on retention. And so, we've talked about it before, this being a competitive advantage. You're almost putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage if you're not really at the forefront of this right now.
Good point.
So we've talked about the barriers and the challenges that organizations are facing. What does a successful finance modernization for a professional service firm actually require?
That's a good question. And when we think about that, it's a systems problem, and that's systems plural, not just a technology upgrade. And when we go about doing these financial modernization and assessment of the clients, we think about four key components, and we can think about them as four systems: people, process, data, technology. Do I have the right people in place with the right skill set? Do I have the right processes, modernized processes? Are my processes automated to its utmost ability? Do I have the right visibility and access to my data? And more importantly, do I have the right technology stack? In today's world, most technologies are enablers and connectors. Does my technology connect to my other systems? We think all four of these things must go together and be in sync for to have progressive results. If not, progress will stall. Example of this is implementing new technology without fixing processes. If you implement new technology without fixing processes, there's no real ROI. I like to say if you get it, just because you get a new shiny ERP does not mean you're going to create efficiencies, visibility, and into data if you still have those same broke down processes.
You're right, Alex. Where we've seen the challenges are where people treat this like a software project update instead of an operating systems model change. And so you really need leadership buy-in. And you need to think about it. The technology now is so much different. It's so much more efficient. If you continue to use the same processes and you're just changing the software program, you're really functioning sort of just like you talked about with all of those different key components. They're not functioning. That wheel's not spinning as efficiently as it could. You've got a broken gear in there. And so it's really about taking a look at all that technology does offer, but then what within your original processes can be changed, modernized as well, so that everything functions together smoothly.
Good point.
This can often seem overwhelming at first for companies. So in your opinion, where should firms focus to really see the biggest and best impact?
We like to advise our clients, start with a process that has the most impactful impact to your bottom line. That's order to cash. Order to cash is one of the significant processes that's going to have the most significant impact to your bottom line. And why is that? Why does it matter? Again, order to cash directly impacts your cash flows. In professional services, we talked about earlier, realization is a key KPI. It impacts your realization. And then margins. Where do we typically see a breakdown when we're going through a finance modernization? We're starting with order to cash. We typically see there's a pricing disconnect from cost. Is my pricing structure, is it even built to manage it and make the margins I need based on my cost structure? Delayed or inaccurate time entry. Again, as we alluded to earlier, what makes professional service so unique? It's the people and it's the billable hours. So if you're not getting your time in, your billable hours in timely, you're not able to get out those invoices on a timely basis. And that kind of leads into the next point: manual billing and invoice rework. If you're still doing manual billing in today's world with the AI that we talked about and technology enablers, you really have a slow routine process. And so what does a modernization look like if we do start with order to cash? What are some of the things we're going to kind of focus on? Integrated workflows. We started this whole conversation talking about AI. Believe it or not, no matter what system you're in, be it NetSuite, be it QuickBooks, be it Sage, SAP, there's some very generic AI integrations that are built in. And we tell a lot of clients, let's start by using those actual integrations within the systems that you currently have when you think about modernizing.
Another is the real-time margin visibility. We see that a lot where there's a big impact from having that visibility. You're making different decisions based on true fully loaded margin cost. We've seen that especially in our engineering firms. There are different services that they're providing, and they might get marketing dollars, they might get a higher level of support. And once we see truly fully loaded margin, all of a sudden we realize that those projects, they're not as profitable as we think. They might be high dollar, they might be high visibility, but they might not necessarily be contributing to the margin the way other, maybe less sexy projects are contributing. So that's one where we see a lot of impact.
Another place where we can see a significant impact, what we'll call a quick win, automated billing. Just like we talked about, if you can move to automated billing, you reduce the hours and time of the manual process and making it automated. Another area that we really help when we're talking order to cash, predictive collections. We actually had a client of ours right now where we help develop a SQL AR process for them so that they have better visibility, more insightful visibility into their AR, which helps their collection teams go after more collections. We like to say most margin leakage happens in the execution of finance and not in the strategy. And what do we mean by that? Typically, where we find the inefficiencies is in the billing process when we're talking order to cash and professional services.
So Alex, you mentioned AI for the first time on that last question. How are digital transformation and AI actually being used today?
Good question, Kristen. The biggest opportunity isn't flashy AI, and we know we have that with some of these systems now. It's foundational improvement, and we talked about it earlier. Believe it or not, most of your system has an underlying fundamental AI or integration built into it already. Data integration. Most systems now have some type of enabler connector that allows you to integrate multiple systems. Make sure we're using those data integration. That is AI. Automation, again, can we automate the billing process? Is there any pieces in the process that we can automate without changing anything? And you'll find there's a lot built into some of your ERP systems. And then analytics. How are we using analytics? How do we get visibility to the data? Is the data clean and accurate? I will say from a practical AI use cases, a couple of things that we've seen that help clients on automating financial commentary. There's no reason why you can't put your month over month, year over year analytics into a AI agent and ask it to write out your commentary. Another place we really see AI usage in our clients is scenario planning and forecasting. Again, AR and also AR collection optimization. As I talked about earlier, we're actually helping a client as we speak now, build out automation through their AR collections to optimize that process and really have their billers and collectors focus more on collecting the money than pulling the data. It's an important reality to note that most organizations are still in the early stage of maturity when it comes to this AI curve. The other thing I would say here, just to kind of, we talk a lot about AI. AI only works if the data is clean. Think about it. AI can only give you the results it ingests based off the data you input and the data it's pulling. So you want clean, accurate data. AI only works if systems are integrated. If I have a system, if I have multiple systems and one of those systems have the AI agent and I can't speak to other systems, it's really hard to really get accurate results if I can't pull from that other system and integrate the information we're looking at. And then obviously teams need to know how to use AI, how to use insights. These are kind of key insights we think to really help advance your AI journey. One of the things we like to say is AI doesn't fix a broken finance process, it only amplifies it.
Sure. So in conclusion, today we've heard a lot of information, a lot of really valid insights. But if you're listening to this and you're a CFO of an organization, where do you start?
Yep. I'll give you 3 practical steps, 3 easy first kind of start steps. Identify where time and margin is being lost. Again, as we talked about earlier, within professional services, it's a people business, it's a people drive revenue. So let's identify where time and margins are being lost in your order to cash process. Establish reliable data foundation. Again, let's know which system has my source of truth, and then I can start to establish the reliable data and using that system as my source of truth. And then again, where do I focus on? Focus on high impact processes, i.e. order to cash. Final takeaway, every firm we find is modernizing right now. The ones that win are the ones who actually execute.
That's a great point, Alex. So, if you're a CFO, your mindset needs to be, at one point in time, this was a competitive advantage. Every firm is modernizing now. If I'm not doing it, I'm putting myself at a competitive disadvantage. The things that we talked about today, they impact recruiting, retention, culture, the entire firm. And so you can't think about this as an expense or just as overhead anymore. This is really about how efficient we are going to go and run our business. And again, impacts across all levels of the firm. So it really does need to be something that you think about when you're thinking about the firm's strategy. You also need to be thinking about finance modernization being a key component to that.
I just want to say thank you for joining us for this episode of the Professional Services Podcast series. And a huge thank you to Scott and Alex for sharing their insights on how CFOs are leading the transformation process across the business. I think if there's one takeaway, It really is that modernization isn't just a technology upgrade, it's an operating model shift. To Scott's point, it really is going to impact your whole organization, not just an expense to add on to a technology. So the firms that execute this will be the ones that win, and we know that all the firms are working through this right now and are somewhere within their journey. So be sure to subscribe for more insights from us, and we will see you next time. Thank you.